After the Qingming Festival, the government suddenly issued an emergency alert. Anyone who has experienced headaches or hallucinations after visiting graves recently, or who has seen strange black figures, please go to the nearest hospital immediately to register. At 8 p.m., Mom, who was on shift at the hospital, suddenly sent a photo. It was a family photo we took yesterday after visiting the graves. This was really strange. In the empty space behind our family portrait, there was a tall black figure. Soon after, Mom sent a text message. The hospital is full of patients. It's back again. What is back? I was confused, but Mom didn't reply to my message. Dad, however, frowned, his forehead covered in beads of sweat. His hands trembled as he repeatedly typed and deleted messages before finally sending one to the family group. Could it be an insect or something stretched out in front of the lens? Mom didn't reply immediately. 10 minutes later, she sent another photo. The photo was taken when we were at the restaurant after visiting the graves. About 5 meters away from our table, the black figure appeared again. Mom quickly sent another message. It's everywhere. Those figures are in all the photos. Dad's hands were trembling as he typed. It was obvious he was extremely nervous. Don't scare yourself. Qingming festivals in previous years have been fine. How could it suddenly appear now? Dad quickly checked the photos he took on the day we visited the graves, but none of them contained the black figure Mom mentioned. He instantly breathed a sigh of relief and immediately sent a message to Mom. There's nothing in my photos. Don't worry. It might just be an exposure glitch or something else. But shortly after, Mom sent another photo. It showed Mom doing her rounds with the hospital ward full of patients. The patients all appeared distorted, as though they had seen something utterly terrifying. Before Dad could reply, Mom initiated a video call. The camera showed her face pale and drained of color. Honey, what do we do? I feel like it's back again. After Qingming Festival, so many patients suddenly came to the hospital. They all reported headaches, high fever, and hallucinations, claiming they saw a horrifying black shadow in photos. It must be it. I'm sure of it. Dad was also very nervous, sweating even more, but he tried to act calm. Point the camera around and take a look. The camera panned around, showing only the usual surroundings, nothing out of the ordinary. After turning off the video, Dad asked Mom to take another picture. When we saw the photo, an unprecedented sense of fear instantly washed over us. In the photo, there were dozens of black figures, each with distinct shapes, but they all stood in an extremely eerie posture by every patient's bedside. After seeing this, Dad froze in place, his face turning pale like a sheet of paper. Dad tried to contact Mom again, but no matter what, he couldn't reach her. At that moment, I finally realized the severity of the situation and quietly asked, Dad, what exactly is that thing? Dad looked terrified and made a shushing gesture. It has no name, and I've only heard about it from the elders in the family. When I was young, it appeared on a large scale once before. I think it was right after Qingming Festival as well. No one knows why it appears. I only know that it first shows up in photos, and after a while, it comes into reality and takes away those who have seen it. I could feel Dad's voice trembling as he spoke. After finishing, Dad packed some clothes and prepared to take me to the hospital to find Mom. In the underground parking lot, Dad opened the bag, which contained freshly cleaned clothes. Put on these clothes first. They're brand new and have no scent. I've heard that thing is extremely sensitive to smells and afraid of light. Dad scattered our old clothes along the way in the parking lot and on the road to the hospital. Everything felt so strange. It was only 8 p.m. The normally bustling streets now only had a few people burning paper and kneeling in worship. Dad and I quickly arrived at the hospital. Whether it was due to the government's warning or the increasing number of sick people recently, the entire hospital was in chaos, contrasting sharply with the deserted streets. Mom's department was on the second floor of the hospital. When we reached the second floor, we saw a group of people gathered together. At the center of the crowd was a man sobbing uncontrollably, while Mom comforted him nearby. Dad quickly recognized the man. It was John, an old neighbor from our hometown. This made things even more confusing. Our hometown is over 1,000 kilometers away. How could it be such a coincidence that we met him here at the hospital today? And judging from John's appearance, something serious had clearly happened. Dad gestured to Mom and then asked John, John, what are you doing here? John froze for a moment upon seeing Dad but didn't answer his question. Instead, he suddenly knelt to the ground, crying again. Dad pulled him up. Get up and talk. What's going on? Don't make a scene. Only then did John stand up and wipe his tears. My parents are dead. Dad was shocked and quickly asked. Robert and Mary were just in their 60s. How did they die so suddenly? John, teary-eyed, replied. They were harmed by something unknown. We all frowned as John brought out a video clip. The video showed a pool of blood, with clothing nearby, but no bodies or human remains. Seeing this, both my parents' faces turned pale as they bit their lips tightly. Even those watching nearby began to gag because the scene was just too eerie. Dad took the video and carefully zoomed in on a corner of the frame. There in the distance stood a blurry black figure near the bloodstain. Normally, people wouldn't be taller than the surrounding walls. After all, the walls in the northeast are generally about 2 meters high. But the black figure's head was above the wall. John was stunned, exclaiming, "What is that? Could it be something like a black bear?" Someone nearby suggested. But others immediately refuted. Look carefully. It's taller than the wall. Have you ever seen a black bear that tall? The person blushed and said, Grizzly bear. A grizzly bear could be that big. Dad frowned and said, This thing might be what killed your parents. But it's too blurry to tell what it is. John nodded and said, The wilderness is full of strange creatures. I need to go back and check. That thing killed my parents. I have to hunt it down. Dad immediately grabbed him. Brother, listen to me. Nobody knows how dangerous that thing is. You're rushing in recklessly. You could end up like your parents. Others nearby joined in persuading him, and John finally calmed down. After a brief conversation, Dad took Mom and me away from the scene. I was a bit puzzled. Dad, why don't you tell Uncle John it might be that thing? Dad shook his head. No, we can't say anything. The people in the hospital and John clearly don't know about its existence. If we tell them outright, no one will believe it. Instead, it'll only cause panic. I frowned, suddenly recalling something. Dad, I remember John's parents. They passed away a long time ago, didn't they? A few years ago, you even brought me back to attend their funeral. The video just now didn't make sense. Did it? After hearing my question, I could clearly see Dad pause for a moment. He didn't answer me but instead turned to look at Mom. Honey, what exactly did you ask me to come to the hospital for? Mom pulled us to a quiet corner where no one was around and whispered. After I sent you the last photo, the hospital was suddenly attacked by some unknown creature. Later, we discovered that some patients went missing for no apparent reason. All that was left were some bloodstains and the clothes they were wearing. But even if something killed them, there should be some remnants of their bodies. We searched the entire hospital but found nothing. But that's not even the scariest part. Mom's expression grew darker as she continued. I could sense the tremor in her voice as she spoke. The scariest part is, I found out that all the missing people have one thing in common. They all had photos taken after Qingming Festival with those black figures in the background. Some of them are even from our hometown. Dad paused for a moment after hearing this. You mean its appearance might be related to visiting graves? Mom nodded slightly, unsure. Just as they were discussing all this strange and terrifying information, the entire hospital was plunged into darkness. Nearby came a strange sound, like claws scraping against ceramic tiles. Terrified, I spun around, but I couldn't see anything in the pitch-black hospital. A few dozen seconds later, the hospital's power was restored. But what I saw next sent chills down my spine. A large hole had been neatly cut into the glass window next to us. On the floor was a long trail of claw marks, stretching all the way to the restroom at the end of the corridor. Everyone's attention was drawn to the hole in the glass and the claw marks on the floor. Many people began to whisper, What's going on? What just happened? Mom and Dad were holding their breath, their foreheads dripping with cold sweat. John, however, just stared at the broken glass in confusion, looking no different from anyone else. From this alone, it was clear that John had absolutely no idea about it. But my parents didn't have time to concern themselves with John's reaction. Mom's voice trembled as she spoke. Honey, what should we do now? Dad didn't answer, simply staring quietly into the night outside. He seemed to have noticed something, then deliberately lowered his voice. The hospital isn't safe anymore. Let's wait a bit and follow the crowd to leave. At that moment, The hospital security guards also heard the commotion and rushed over. The bald security chief pointed at a thin young man. "Lou, you go check it out." Lou, trembling at the sight of the claw marks on the floor, stammered, "Chief, how about we just call the police?" The chief frowned. "No. Calling the police will cause too much trouble for the hospital and the patients. If it turns out to be nothing, we'll all get fired." Lou had no choice but to brace himself and walk toward the restroom. A group of curious onlookers followed behind him, peering inside. Lou walked in, but it was eerily silent. After 2 minutes, the chief grew impatient. "Lou, what's going on? Say something." The restroom remained silent. Just as the bald chief was about to step inside, some red liquid began to slowly flow out from the restroom. My eyes widened in terror, my fear indescribable. Someone's dead. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. The crowd erupted in chaos as people scattered, trying to get as far away from the hospital as possible. Following our plan, my parents and I ran out with the crowd. But just as we left the hospital, something even more terrifying happened. The area outside the hospital, once lit by streetlights and shop signs, was now shrouded in pitch blackness, with a dense fog rolling in. Only the hospital remained lit, and even with phone flashlights, the visibility was no more than a meter. My parents immediately realized something was wrong and dared not go any further. The crowd, too, burst into panic. "What's going on? It was bright when we came in. Why is it all dark now? Could it be a blackout? How's that possible? If it's a blackout, why does the hospital still have power? Yeah, and what's with this fog? How could there be fog at night? Call the police. Somebody call the police." Only now did people think to call the police, but they quickly discovered that, no matter how many times they dialed, their phones kept showing no signal. Some brave souls began using their phone flashlights as they cautiously ventured into the darkness. Others hesitated, staying where they were. Dad glanced at Mom and signaled for us to wait and observe. Silence. It was deathly silent all around. But a few minutes later, a blood-curdling scream shattered the stillness of the night. Then came a second scream, followed by a third, accompanied by the growls of some beast and the sound of bones breaking. The people who had walked into the darkness earlier now came running back, throwing the crowd into chaos once again. Everyone fled back into the hospital, and once inside, the bald security chief ordered the other guards to lock the doors to keep the unknown creatures in the darkness out. Inside the hospital, everyone was on edge, terrified and clueless about what had just happened. Suddenly, the ones who had returned from the darkness seemed to recall something and turned to John. "Just now, I saw lots of blood and clothing in the darkness. The way those people died is the same as how this guy's parents died. Could it be that he brought something strange here?" The voice grew louder, and everyone turned to look at John. The same person pointed at John and shouted, "Him! He definitely knows something. What's going on?" The bald security chief directly questioned John. John was equally bewildered. "I don't know either." But the nearby crowd didn't believe him. "That's impossible. You must know something. Your parents were killed by some strange thing. That thing must want to kill you too. That's why it followed you here." The security chief, having arrived later, hadn't seen the video of John's parents. So he demanded from John, "What thing?" John took out the video, but no matter how many times the chief watched it, he couldn't figure out what it was. The others chimed in one after another. "Chief, you really need to take a good look. How could such bizarre events happen without something so strange involved?" John's face turned red, clearly unsure of what to say. Suddenly, Dad spoke up. "This video clearly shows a rural area. It's far from here. Even if there's something strange in the countryside, how could it chase someone all the way here?" With Dad's reasoning, the others weren't sure how to counter, so they stopped hounding John. John thanked Dad, and Dad waved it off. "We're all from the same hometown. Looking out for each other is normal. Right now, though, we're all stuck in this hospital, and no one knows what to do." Just then, Mom gently nudged Dad, who immediately understood and walked to a secluded area. Mom spoke up, "I feel like something is watching us." Dad frowned and took a selfie with his phone. Sure enough, the photo showed countless black shadows surrounding us. At that point, the chief ordered everyone to move into the cafeteria, which was surrounded by walls and reinforced glass. Staying together might provide some safety. The chief started inspecting the hospital, and soon, we heard his voice. "There are claw marks near the wall by the pipes. 2 other security guards immediately rushed over. Shortly afterward, I heard faint rustling noises. Then came the sounds of an intense struggle. Minutes later, the chief retreated from the pipe area. John approached him, apparently wanting to ask what had happened. At that moment, as I watched John's back, I suddenly felt something was off. When John walked a few steps further, I realized what was wrong. He was hopping as he walked, never putting both feet on the ground at the same time. Even more disturbing was that as his pants shifted during walking, I could see thick patches of red fur around his ankles. Shivering, I turned to Dad. Dad, I don't think that's Uncle John. It looks more like some creature pretending to be him. And I really remember that his parents passed away long ago. Dad glanced at John ahead of us, suddenly trembling and murmuring, "Dead, dead. Maybe we're dead too." Watching Dad's almost manic expression, I felt deeply afraid. I didn't understand why he would say that, but soon he returned to normal. Then, the hospital lights went out again, and the sharp sound of claws scraping the floor echoed everywhere. It felt as if my eardrums might burst at any moment. This time, everyone was completely overcome with fear. Many began shouting, "Run! It's not safe here." Dad tried to warn everyone, yelling, "They're too smart. They're intentionally creating panic to scatter us and kill us one by one." But the crowd was too frantic to listen. They rushed out of the hospital. As more and more people left the hospital, we had no choice but to follow the crowd. But as we plunged into the darkness, the crowd grew increasingly sparse. Eventually, only our family of 3, John, and 5 strangers were left around us. The fewer people there were, the bolder those things became. It was already extremely dangerous. Dad shouted to everyone, "We must stay together now, move as one tightly packed group. If we scatter any further, none of us will survive." At that moment, the screams and cries of people echoed all around, and everyone agreed to follow Dad's suggestion. But with the darkness so dense, it was impossible to discern direction. No one knew where safety lay. There should be a police station about 5 kilometers west of the hospital. We could run there for help. Someone in the group suggested, and everyone agreed, heading in the direction they recalled. Midway through the run, Dad suddenly seemed to remember something and shouted, "Roll call." We all began responding. 1, 2, 3, 10. Cold sweat poured down my face. Weren't there only 9 people here just a moment ago? Where did the 10th person come from? Could it be? Dad, terrified, turned on his phone's flashlight and pointed it behind the group. In the darkness, trailing our group was a man we didn't recognize. The man spoke up, "I accidentally got separated from the previous group earlier. I was scared to be alone, so I joined you. It turned out to be a false alarm." Still, everyone became acutely aware of the danger and quickened their pace. After about half an hour, our group finally spotted a light in the distance. Driven by desperation, everyone rushed toward it. Once out of the darkness, everyone was overjoyed, convinced the danger had passed. Many decided to head back home. Mom asked Dad for his opinion, and Dad still felt the police station would be safer. We could spend the night there and leave the city by plane tomorrow. Mom agreed, and Dad picked up his phone and said to us, "I'll call a taxi. A taxi's various smells might keep us safe." He opened the ride-hailing app and sent a message to the driver. "When you arrive, turn on your hazard lights and honk once." The driver replied with an "okay" on the app. After that, I started observing my surroundings again and quickly sensed something was off. Despite seeing scattered people around, I felt like something was watching me. And why were they burning paper money? Qingming Festival had passed a week ago. Occasionally, I even saw people turn their heads and flash eerie smiles at us as they walked by. The entire city seemed abnormal. I turned to Dad and said, "Dad, I feel like something's off. Not just off, really wrong." Dad froze for a moment. "What did you notice?" I thought for a moment. It's only 11 p.m., but the streets are far too quiet. And earlier, there was a strong wind on our way to the hospital. Now there's none at all. Dad quickly scanned the surroundings and indeed noticed the odd stillness. There was no wind and an eerie silence. Though there were people around, it was unnervingly quiet. Before we could figure out what was going on, the taxi arrived. The driver kept urging us to get in the car, but Dad stared at him intently. The driver seemed impatient and shouted, "Get in quickly. Don't waste time." Dad asked, "What's the code?" The driver ignored Dad and continued urging us to get in. seemingly unaware of any code. Seeing we didn't board, the driver swore and drove off. A few minutes later, something happened that left me stunned. An identical car appeared, a perfect replica, down to the license plate and driver. This time, the car had its hazard lights on and honked once. What was going on? Dad's face darkened as he muttered to himself. This makes no sense. What's happening? Where did things go wrong? Mom and I exchanged glances, equally baffled. Just then, we suddenly heard John shouting from a distance. Run! Run quickly! We turned toward the direction of his voice, and a bone-chilling fear gripped me. Behind John was an incredibly terrifying black shadow, the very creature from the photos. Dad yelled that this was bad, muttering that the creatures could now kill indiscriminately. We didn't have time to think. The three of us quickly got into the car, but John was taken away by the shadow. My mom sat in the car with a complex expression on her face, while my dad shouted at the driver. Driver, drive quickly. You saw it just now too. Something is chasing us. The driver didn't respond but quickly started driving away. Behind us, the shadows multiplied and relentlessly chased after us. After we managed to shake off some of them, my dad asked the driver, Driver, did you take the wrong route? The driver glanced at my dad and responded, No mistake. Isn't the destination a cemetery? That's the ride you booked. My dad froze for a second. He had booked the ride to the police station, not the cemetery. But when my dad checked his phone, the destination clearly indicated the cemetery. We frowned, unsure whether the driver or the app was acting strange. The driver suddenly chuckled and said, What's wrong, buddy? I happened to be on my way to the cemetery to visit a grave when I took this ride. If you don't want to go, you can get out now. My dad hesitated briefly, knowing monsters could appear at any moment around us. Clenching his teeth, he replied, Fine, just drive us there quickly, even if it's the cemetery. The driver nodded and mentioned traffic congestion on the way to the cemetery. We were surprised. This road was normally desolate. How could it be congested? The driver laughed again and said, Usually, no one travels here, but today is Memorial Day. Everyone's out visiting graves. Of course, there are crowds, and you're traveling at exactly the time people visit graves. Our faces turned grim in unison. Today was clearly April 11th. How could it be Memorial Day? And besides, it was nighttime. Who visits graves at this hour? Suddenly, I remembered the government's emergency alert. Could the driver be hallucinating? Was he sick too? That didn't make sense. Why wouldn't he have noticed it himself? Moreover, the driver's words didn't sound like those of someone hallucinating. The driver then added, Why didn't you bring some joss paper yourselves? You know it's expensive to buy it around here. They depend on these few days to rip off people like you. My dad replied with a few casual remarks before pulling out his phone. A bone-chilling cold enveloped us as the phone clearly showed that today was April 5th. Memorial Day. What was going on? My mom and dad also checked their phones, finding the date stuck at April 5th. When my dad reopened the ride-hailing app, the destination was indeed from home to the cemetery. But we had just left the hospital. How could this be? What was happening? My mom started searching through photos on her phone. But there were only photos up to April 3rd. Those of huge black shadows were missing. Even our family portrait at the cemetery was gone. What day was it really? What had we gone through? Panicked, my dad turned to the driver and asked, Driver, we were waiting for the car just now. Weren't there four of us? The driver frowned and replied, No, just the three of you. Even though it's foggy today, it's not like I'd miss seeing a living person, right? There was no John. Then what had just happened? Could John have been an illusion? But everything felt so real. We were completely lost and unsure of what to do. The car soon reached the cemetery. The driver dropped us off and then headed into the cemetery himself. We got out of the car to find the cemetery shrouded in mist. Suddenly, my mom pointed into the distance, unable to utter a word. In the thick fog ahead, there was a massive black shadow. It's coming! It's coming! My mom began to scream in terror. Just as we were about to run, we noticed the car beside us had caught fire. Amid the flames, we realized the car wasn't normal. It was made of paper. All of us suddenly felt chills run down our spines. But what followed was an even more terrifying revelation. This wasn't a local public cemetery. It was the burial site of our ancestral graves. At that moment, my parents and I exchanged stunned glances. We suddenly seemed to realize something and ran toward the location of our family's ancestral graves, which were my grandparents' resting place. The graves were surrounded by overgrown weeds, looking desolate and abandoned. It was evident that no one had visited here in years. At that moment, we remembered everything. We hadn't visited for Memorial Day at all. We were just taking a holiday trip. So what was the cause of all this we were going through? Gradually, the mist in the cemetery began to dissipate. Two massive black shadows slowly approached us. For some reason, I felt a strange sense of familiarity when I saw the shadows. They simply stood there silently, not attacking us. They just watched us quietly from a short distance away. I reflexively took a step forward, but my mom pulled me back. It was then I noticed the cemetery was filled with many people, including John. But hadn't John just been captured and killed by those black shadows? How could he now be here? At this moment, my mom began shouting in astonishment. Because she recognized the missing villagers from the hospital, they were all here too. None of them were dead or missing. They had all been brought here. At this moment, everyone seemed to realize what was really happening. My dad suddenly fell to his knees and broke down crying. "I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." At that moment, I saw the massive shadow in the mist move slightly. For some reason, my heart suddenly ached as I felt a piercing pain. My consciousness began fading, and past memories flooded back. I remember how, as a child, we lived with my grandparents in the countryside. Though life was hard, it was the happiest time of my life. The spring flowers, the summer breeze, the autumn leaves, and the winter snow. All these were part of my fond memories of home. Grandpa and Grandma loved me dearly. They always thought of me first with anything good to eat or wear. They would skimp on themselves but never for me. I remember Grandpa joking with me once, "When Grandpa goes someday, you must visit often, okay?" At the time, I was too young to understand that going meant leaving forever. Later, my parents found work in the city, and we moved here permanently. After that, our visits to the countryside became fewer and fewer. Every time my parents took me back home, I'd beg them to leave after just a few days. The city was more exciting, it had friends and video games, while the countryside felt dull. I remember, each time I left, Grandpa and Grandma would stand by the door watching me go. There was light in their eyes, but looking back on it, they were probably tears. When Grandpa and Grandma passed away, we barely visited the countryside again. Sometimes saying goodbye really does mean never seeing each other again. As I recalled these memories, a sharp sadness surged through me. When I regained clarity, I realized we were already in the car driving downhill. I checked the time. It was still April 4th, Memorial Day. I turned to my parents. "It's all fine now?" My parents looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I exclaimed. "What about the two massive black shadows in the mist? Did they disappear?" My mom gently touched my head. "What's this child talking about? There were no massive shadows." Frowning, I looked around at the sunlight-filled surroundings, clueless about what had just happened. "Dad, Mom, weren't we traveling today? Why are we back in the countryside?" Hearing my question, my parents exchanged worried glances before explaining. "Actually, we told you we were going on a trip, but the truth is, we wanted to come back to the countryside to visit the graves. We were afraid you wouldn't agree, so we said it was a vacation. After you got off the plane, you realized we were in the countryside and started throwing a tantrum. So, we left you at the old house in the village. Later, you said you missed Grandpa and Grandma, so you came here on your own." After hearing their explanation, I didn't know what to say. Could everything I experienced have been a dream I had in the car while asleep? But if everything was as my parents said, why couldn't I remember the details of visiting the graves earlier? Feeling conflicted, I glanced toward my grandparents' graves, my emotions in turmoil. Suddenly, I told my parents to stop the car. They turned to me, puzzled, as I explained, "I forgot to say something important to Grandpa and Grandma. Wait for me here. I'll be right back." My parents hesitated but finally nodded, saying they'd wait in the car. I rushed toward my grandparents' graves, kneeling before them and finally bursting into tears. "Grandpa, Grandma, I'm sorry. I came to visit you. I've missed you so much." Hearing my sobs, my parents also ran over. Suddenly, I saw many shadows appear again, but this time, they transformed into people. Grandpa approached me first and gently touched my head. Grandma followed, patting my parents' heads with the same tenderness. The other elderly figures slowly approached, smiling kindly. Gradually, their bodies dissipated, floating up toward the sky. I looked up at the sky and remembered an old saying, "People who pass away become stars in the sky. As long as someone remembers them, their connection to the world remains. They aren't truly gone. Forgetting them is the ultimate death." Perhaps it was our forgetting that caused them to lose their identities. It made them morph into those massive shadowy figures, becoming monsters. Seeing how deeply I cried, my parents looked at me perplexed, unable to see the shadows. Maybe Grandpa and Grandma missed me so much that only I could see them. In that moment, I understood. There's no way our ancestors wouldn't love us. They could never harm us. Remembering them often, that is what descendants should do. My parents gazed skyward. Our ancestors will continue to bless us from above. I shook my head. No, it's more like, we must continue to remember them from here on earth. I saw all the departed people in the cemetery, now paying respects to their own ancestors. Turned out everything was because they missed us.